The following program contains material of an enlightening nature. Open-mindedness is advised.
Today, I want you to open your mind.
I've almost come to the conclusion that the story is so damning that the mass of people can't deal with it.
We are in process of developing a whole series of techniques to get people actually to love their servitude.
We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
To change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people of the world, and especially the United States, to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
As you connect the dots between different people, organizations, places, religions, history, suddenly the picture starts to form. You don't connect the dots, it's just a mass of what's all this about.
The kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure.
Someone born in the United States is not more special than someone born in Mexico. Someone who is white is not more special than someone who is black. They're just vehicles for the consciousness to experience.
Brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people.
War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength.
Humans as a species are prone to amnesia. Those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. It is thus imperative that these all-important matters be thoroughly explored and not left up to blind faith.
It's about time some of you got acquainted with the...
We wanted to believe. We wanted to call out. On August 20th and September 5th, 1977, two spacecraft were launched from the Kennedy Space Flight Center, Florida. They were called Voyager. Each one carries a message.
I send greetings on behalf of the people of our planet. We step out of our solar system into the universe seeking only
a gold-plated record depicting images, music, and sounds of our planet, arranged so that it may be understood if ever intercepted by a technologically mature extraterrestrial civilization.
Hello from the children of planet Earth.
13 years after its launch, Voyager 1 passed the orbital plane of Neptune and essentially left our solar system. Within that time, there were no further messages sent, nor are any planned.
What you are now experiencing is the vibration of air particles being transformed into electrical signals by your senses and DNA, then sent to the brain where they are decoded into sounds. I'm your host, Ryan Gable, soon to be joined by my co-host, Mike D., and you are listening to The Secret Teachings. Our website is www.thesecretteachings.info. That's www.thesecretteachings.info. If you head on over to the website, there is a link. It'll say The Secret Teachings Archive in all capital letters. If you click on that, you will be able to access our entire archive for free. You can download and or stream all of our past episodes, up to about 5 years, I think, of episodes that I've uploaded so far. And each week as we present a new show, there's a new show uploaded to the website, and it is free to download. Lots of information. Each show is roughly about 2 hours, 58 minutes to 3 hours. It's all free. I take so much time during the week doing research, reading, and trying to piece together what in the hell is going on in the world around us. Last week, we had a really great show. We had Laura Lee from the Ghostbuster Gals on, and that last Saturday, I believe we talked about spirit animals, so that was really fun. This week, in fact, tonight and tomorrow, both at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, so the same exact time that this is airing right now, we are going to be talking about an assortment of different topics. we are going to be talking about what people perceive to be extraterrestrials. We are going to be talking about what people perceive to be aliens, the arguments for, the arguments against. And how this really started out was I was reading a book a couple of weeks ago, and if you remember about 2 weeks ago, I had Courtney Brown from the Farsight Institute on the program, and we talked about the remote viewing session of Cydonia on Mars, that famous region where there's supposedly this image of the face, something else we'll talk about here on the Secret Teachings tonight, and there's supposedly some tetrahedron structure, some pyramid formations, and this has kind of been blown up in, I guess you could say, the mainstream at one point until NASA claimed that they debunked the fact that this was a face and that this was maybe some type of past civilization. And then the alternative media kind of picked it up and ran with it to an extent. And Courtney came on the show and he talked about their Farsight Institute and the remote viewing and the two remote viewers who remote viewed Mars. And what they found on Mars, these kind of human-like beings in the past and these underground tunneling systems and networks. And regardless of what you think about remote viewing, if you heard that episode, if you haven't heard it, I would recommend going to the website and you can download it for free. You don't have to sign up or give us any information. You just click the link and then you can choose what file format you wish to download the show in. Go listen to that episode because Courtney really laid out some important pieces of information that otherwise you probably would not get, even from alternative sources. And the book that I had been reading prior to having Courtney on, the topics in the book were kind of about the same thing. We're talking about tunnels on Mars, civilizations in the past, perhaps expanding outward, and sending. I don't even know what to call them. I guess you could say scouts or explorers throughout different galaxies and solar systems, and perhaps even different universes, species that are innumerably more advanced than we are, unimaginably more advanced than we are. And in the book that I was reading, there was talk of NASA photographs of Mars. And, of course, I started reading another book recently. I had read the first part of Alien Agenda by Jim Marrs, who we also had on the show about a year and a half ago. That episode's also on the website. You can download for free. And we had Jim Marrs on to talk about the concealment of extraterrestrials, perhaps by government officials and powerful elite members of our society who know that extraterrestrials exist and yet won't publicly acknowledge it. And there's a lot of reasons that we can get into for that. But my personal view is, and I believe, much different than, obviously, the mainstream, and it's much different than the alternative. And it's also much different than the fringe faction of society that both the alternative and the mainstream would both look at and say, wow, you're really out there. Wow, you're really crazy. Because what we're able to do here at the Secret Teachings is nobody's telling us what to say, nobody's telling us what to do, nobody's telling me that I can or cannot talk about a particular subject, and if I do talk about that particular subject, how I have to address it. I'm giving you my point of view, and a lot of this is going to be factually based on that word, facts, what we can perceive to be facts, not theories, facts. We can present some theories, we can present some ideas, and it's important to remember that both the mainstream and the alternative, what they present as a fact is typically just a theory. Or they try to build facts off of theories, and when the theory gets misconstrued, it's taken out of place, then they all of a sudden think that we can't go any further because Einstein's theory says that you can't travel faster than the speed of light, even though it has been proven that light in a tube has been able to essentially sent out the other side before it even enters it, traveling 2, 3, 4 times the speed of light as we perceive it to be. Reality is not what we think it is, and we're going to get into that today. We are going to get into the fact that the solar system is not what we think it is, that the universe is not what we think it is, that there is much more to know there's much more out there. And all I'm going to do is simply ask some questions. If you go to the website, www.thesecretteachings.info, on the home page, you will find a promotional page for tonight and tomorrow's show. It's a two-part special edition. I know most of you know The Secret Teachings. We typically air 9 p.m., 6 p.m. Pacific for 3 hours, Saturday and Sunday night. And you can always go to the website and get the episodes after they air. This weekend, same exact deal, except it's a two-part back-to-back episode. So you need to be here tonight and tomorrow to be able to get the full gist of what we're talking about. And I also have something for all of the listeners out there so you can kind of keep up with what we're talking about as we begin to get into some official photographs of Earth's moon, of Mars and the moons of Mars, of the rings of Saturn, and of our sun, our soul. Official photographs from NASA and from the Russian Space Agency that I've compiled into a PDF format, and I have uploaded it to the website. You can download it for free in a PDF. There are links in this file to either JPL or NASA, where you can go and look at the photographs on their official website. There are links to news stories, such as the one of how NASA supposedly lost the moon tapes, the moon landing tapes. They just couldn't find them, and they turned up, I think, in a McDonald's somewhere. I've got the link from the mainstream news. It's hard to find in this piece that you can download for free. So again, it's all free. You don't have to sign up for anything. I know it's weird. People typically don't give things away for free, but it is free. It's on the website, thesecretteachings.info. Go there, download this file. I think it's 32 or 33 pages. It's like 30, 40 megabytes. It's huge because most of the pages are just huge photos blown up, massive size, and then they have a link at the bottom. And I've got the numbers for everything. And what I tended to find when I was looking for some of the images is that a lot of them have blatantly been altered. Some of them, I was looking through Fred Steckling's book. He was a former engineer at NASA. And his book, I think it was called We Found Alien Bases, or We Discovered Alien Bases is what it was. We discovered alien bases on the moon. And I'm looking through a lot of the photos that he had put in the book. And a lot of them, when I typed in the number into a search engine with some additional keywords, I found that these images were nowhere to be found in NASA or even some of their archival sites or JPL. I spent, literally, ladies and gentlemen, I spent 10 hours of my life that I could have spent doing something else, looking through official photographs. I went through all of the Lunar Observatory photographs, thousands of photos for the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth LOs. I went through thousands of photographs so that I could find the ones that were the most relevant and that were the most damning in terms of evidence, and I put them in this file for you to download. So again, that file is free, but I spent 10 hours, and I found that, one, a lot of the images have been completely altered. Two, I found that some of the images simply have been removed, and some of the images have been moved. So they've been moved from one particular name to another name, so it's much more difficult to find them. I did the digging, and I found these photographs anyway, and that's the reason I know that they were misplaced, perhaps. Now, you would think that the moon landings, probably the biggest achievement, arguably, in human history, some people might argue that, would be something that you might want to keep locked up or, at least digitized in some format. You would think so, but they just ended up they just disappeared, and they were demagnetized, some of them apparently, and the rest of them ended up at a abandoned McDonald's somehow. It's just a lot more going on. And we're not even really into the introduction of today's show yet. Who knows? This might even go into 3 parts. There's a lot of evidence in our own solar system of extraterrestrial presences. Now, the thing is, if it's not extraterrestrial and it's not some type of scientific anomaly that we cannot understand, which is very possible, a lot of the images we see on the moon and the sun, just because we can't understand it or we see it and NASA says, oh, it's natural, it's normal, well, it might very well be. It might be some type of natural phenomena that we just basically haven't been able to understand yet. Perhaps a lot of the images of what we perceive to be UFOs are really just debris off of some NASA observer or off of a rocket. Perhaps in some way that's true, but there's a certain point, just like the phenomena of UFOs here on Earth, there's a certain point where so many people see them that it kind of becomes the consensus and the reality. That still does not mean that these are extraterrestrial beings. They very well could be, and this is more what I postulate, is that they are not alien at all, but in fact governmental black operations projects which operate at the highest secrecy, that above the president, perhaps even above Q clearance, and that these objects, maybe they were reverse engineered, I don't know, these unidentified flying objects are test vehicles, and the myth about extraterrestrials has been promoted in order to cover these programs up. Perhaps so, perhaps not. I'm not exactly sure, but we will get into some more of that tonight as well. I would advise you, if you're just joining us, to do a couple of things. First of all, take a deep breath, sit back, maybe grab a snack and a drink, relax, because tonight and tomorrow is going to be a lot of information, so you might want to grab a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper and take some notes. Not because I'm smarter than you, but because this is what I found, and it took me 10 hours just to research the photos. I probably spent a full 24-hour day compiling everything that we're discussing today and tomorrow. And it's all completely free. Now, there's this argument that seems to come about when we talk about extraterrestrials. There's actually 3 arguments that I put together that people tend to use when arguing against extraterrestrials or aliens. And let me be the first to tell you that I'm not here saying that aliens exist and I can prove it for sure. But I'm also not arrogant and ignorant enough to say that aliens don't exist. I can't prove it, but they don't exist because we're the only thing that exists in the universe, which is beyond arrogance, beyond ignorance. There's not really a way to define that. It's just complete idiocracy. I wanted to define 2 terms before we go any further. First of all, extraterrestrial. There is this very well-founded social conditioning, whether it's purposefully done or it's a byproduct of cultural and social evolutions, where we associate, for example, UFOs with aliens. So we think, there's an unidentified flying object. That's the definition of a UFO. People say UFO instead of unidentified flying object because it obviously shortens the length of the words. And when you say UFO, people think aliens. Or they think you're crazy, they don't exist. But just because aliens maybe don't exist in whatever capacity you believe doesn't mean that somebody didn't see a UFO. You're using that UFO acronym to associate, I've actually done a show on this, associative definitions, to associate the UFO with aliens. So just because you see a UFO does not mean it's extraterrestrial, does not mean it's alien. It does also not mean that it's some government black operations project. It very well might be a reflection of light that could be a very easy scientific explanation. However, I think that a governmental black operations project, a Q clearance government within a government, could also be a scientific explanation for these craft. That also does not mean that these craft have to be reverse engineered from extraterrestrial technology, and it also does not mean that aliens perhaps gave us the information to build these spaceships, whatever they might be called. The concept of the flying saucer or the flying disc actually came from a man named Kenneth Arnold, who is from Boise, Idaho, where I live. And his story of witnessing these flying saucer-type crafts eventually became, this was the reason, the way that he explained it to the media, of why these are called flying saucers, because he explained that they basically skipped upon the water like saucers. So they became flying saucers. That's where the terminology came from. Extraterrestrial. Extraterrestrial means of or from outside the Earth or its atmosphere. So, in using extraterrestrial as an adjective, it just means from outside our atmosphere. So, an asteroid, as it enters the atmosphere, becomes a meteor. As it enters into the lower parts of the atmosphere and strikes the ground, it becomes a meteorite and or a meteoroid. There's different names for them as they enter different levels of the atmosphere. By definition, you could never actually hold a meteor, because a meteor is a rock, dust, metal that's in the atmosphere. It hasn't struck the ground yet, just as a by-the-way kind of a thing. We've done a show on that before as well. So it means outside of the Earth. So you hear maybe NASA officials, or maybe you see a news report about an asteroid that's extraterrestrial. It doesn't mean it came from an ET civilization. It just means that it's from outside the Earth's atmosphere. Using extraterrestrial as a noun, the definition is a hypothetical or fictional being from outer space, especially an intelligent one. Well, that's kind of interesting that the dictionary defines it as a fictional being, because NASA themselves have stated that life does exist in our own solar system. Bacteria has been found on Mars, other moons within our solar system. That, by definition, means that aliens exist. Again, the association, however, is that aliens must mean that they look something like us, or that they look something like the Greys, the reptilians, the cat feline species, or perhaps they look like birds. The Easter Island stories of the birdmen coming down giving fire, the Rongo Rongo language, or Rapa Nui. What I want to do, though, is to break down and alter your perceptions of what you perceive to be a definition of UFOs or extraterrestrials. I think they should add a word in here, perhaps fictional beings, because we don't know. Why are they fictional? Why are they fictional? It doesn't say, if I type in God and I look up God, it says, well, obviously there's a variation of different gods. Adorned or admired or an influential person is a definition of God. But it doesn't say a fictional being. It says a superhuman being or spirit worshipped. Perhaps extraterrestrials could also be, using it as a noun, used in this same category. So if I go ahead and I type in alien, and this is fun to do, the adjective is belonging to a foreign country or nation. So if I say aliens are coming, well, they are across the open border. But if I say alien as a noun, it says a hypothetical or fictional being from another world. Again, fictional. Why does the dictionary say fictional? There's a lot of stuff we can't necessarily readily prove. I mean, can you prove it? The average person, can you prove that your microwave emits radioactivity, electromagnetic radioactivity? Can you prove it? Yes, your food heats up, but can you prove it? Can you see it? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The argument when you're a kid is, well, the air doesn't exist, the air doesn't, it moves things, or perhaps your mind moves it, is another argument, but you can't see it. It still exists, doesn't it? If I type in air to the dictionary, it doesn't say a fictional, invisible, gaseous substance. It just says an invisible gaseous substance surrounding the Earth. It doesn't say a fictional one. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, anyway, extraterrestrial and alien. Now we know the definitions. let's go ahead and look at the arguments against extraterrestrials. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to probably need, I can already tell you this, at least 3 or 4 shows for this. We might do back-to-back episodes of this story. I have Dr. Leonard Caldwell, coming on soon, so maybe we'll do 2 of these episodes, do 2 additional episodes on something else with Dr. C, and then we'll do 2 more of these. I don't even know what we could call them. I guess I could just call them Never a Straight Answer, kind of the joke about NASA. But I'm not even sure, because there's just so much to talk about. I haven't even gotten, and we're already a half hour in, to the introduction to what I wanted to really speak about. But let's look at these arguments against aliens. We're told that they would have to travel thousands or millions of light years to reach us. So, why come here? What makes us so special? And without digging any deeper than that and giving some type of theoretical answer, I could actually respond, and I have many times, respond to that statement with the following statement. Well, you're saying aliens don't exist, or at least you're implying that by saying what makes us so special that aliens would come here. Well, what makes us think that we're so special that, one, they wouldn't come here? Maybe we're so ununique that they'd want to come see us, because being so ununique that we are actually very unique. Or perhaps, what makes us so special that we believe we are the only life that exists in the universe? And the response to that could also be that this is a prison planet. Prisoners are brought here. It's kind of like a zoo. It's kind of like an incubator. If you have, go with me for a second, hypothetically, some animals in a zoo, and the zoo is, I don't know, let's just say that the zoo is a mile by a mile. So it's a massive zoo, a massive, massive zoo. It's almost like a theme park. It's massive. And you've got 2 turtles who grew up in this zoo, and they've lived in a confined space of maybe 10 yards by 10 yards their entire life. Let's give them a little more room. Let's 20 yards by 20 yards their entire life. And within their entire life, they basically think that that's the world, that 20 by 20 yard space that they live in. And when these humans come up and they look in the glass, these turtles, or at least this fringe turtle, if you will, he looks and he says, look, the aliens are back. Look at them. And all the turtles say, you're crazy, Bob. You don't know what you're talking about. There's no such thing as humans. There's no such thing as humans. And Bob's like, look, they're right there. They're looking at us now. The other turtles turn around, the humans walk away, and they're like, I don't see anything, Bob. You're out of your mind. You're losing it. You're crazy. Why would humans want to come here? What makes us turtles so special? I'm using the turtle as an example primarily because it's always kind of been a mythology that the universe is held up on a tortoise's back or a turtle, just as a side note. But anyway, they say, Bob, you're crazy. Why would humans want to come here? We know that this park is a mile by a mile because, I don't know, Jimmy broke out the other day and he got almost a full mile and he hit a wall. We know, and that wall, by the way, could represent the speed of light. That wall is the end of everything. That you can't go past the wall. That's the end of it. That's our universe. That's our life. And Bob keeps saying, but no, you're wrong. But no, you're wrong because there's much more out there. Maybe Bob was donated to the zoo because he used to live out in the real world. And he's telling them that there's humans out here and there's other places to go. There's things to see. There's different foods to eat. And they tell him, no, Bob, you're wrong. You're crazy because this is where we live and this is our home. Nothing else could exist outside of this. And Bob just keeps pressing and saying, but humans exist. They're right there. Why would they travel so far, they tell Bob, to get here? If you're right, and the universe is really so much more vast, why would humans travel so far just to get here? And how are they getting past that wall? How did they get past that wall? We can't even see the top of the wall. How did these humans get past the wall? If you're right, Bob. And Bob just kind of hangs his head and walks into the corner. The other turtles can't comprehend or even conceive of the idea because they've never been outside of that wall. That wall is the end of the line. That wall is the speed of light. But Bob knows that beyond that wall there's something else. Bob knows that humans have vehicles that the turtles can't even imagine that is able to transport them to the zoo. I think that's enough of the zoo example, but I think you also know what I'm saying. Perhaps we, human beings, are the remnants of some powerful culture that advanced beyond any means that we can perceive, beyond imagination, and they established outposts on certain moons in our solar system, Mars, and perhaps Earth's moon, and then eventually moved to Earth. And because Earth was such a flourishing world, flora and fauna and animals and humanoid beings, that they decided to engineer a slave so they didn't have to do all of the work. No, I'm not taking any of this, by the way, from Zachariah Sitchin. I'm not taking any of this even from my friend M. Don Shorn. I'm just simply telling you, and I'm slowing down the process substantially, of how we can better examine these arguments rather than just using some type of associative definition of saying, oh, it's just E.T., it doesn't matter, or, oh, E.T. doesn't exist, you're crazy, you're out there. You're crazy, Bob. Nothing exists past that wall. Perhaps we are the slave remnants of some powerful culture, genetically engineered to mine for specific materials. The second part of the argument is basically this. Even if you say, okay, aliens might exist, but how are they getting here? The technology for that kind of travel doesn't exist. And that's what I call the arrogance of ignorance. The scientists, the doctors, the teachers, the professors, the professionals, the experts that say, Ryan, the aliens can't get here because the technology doesn't exist. And I have to say, time out there. The technology doesn't exist, so they can't get here. Well, just because you haven't developed the technology doesn't mean the technology doesn't exist or could not be developed. Science has been wrong so many times, we could do an entire show on the amount of facts that turned out not to be so factual. Technology of that type of travel just does not exist. Well, first of all, I think it probably already exists on Earth. We just necessarily don't know about it. Second, just because humans have not developed it or built it doesn't mean it can't be developed or built. Humans have been on this planet a blink of an eye. Just like that. We appeared, and just like that, we will disappear. Just because we haven't engineered it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean another advanced species. Perhaps on Earth, we are only 100 years removed from some type of Star Trek warp drive that will be able to bend the fabric of space-time and allow us to travel into other dimensions through portals that have been opened up through a severe amount of energy being calculated and directed towards one specific location in the space-time continuum. Perhaps we are only 100 years away from that technological advancement, but our ignorance and arrogance has prevented us from even conceiving of the idea because we write it off as lunacy. The arrogance of ignorance. We sit back and say that can't exist. But perhaps another advanced civilization, perhaps only a couple of light years from here, just because we haven't discovered a star, just because we haven't discovered a planet doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just because you can't see the air, unless it gets very cold, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Perhaps this species developed 50 years ahead of us. They're only 50 years ahead of us. The technological advancements that come about just in the last decade make the 1990s look far, far primitive. Imagine what another 50 years would do. Imagine what 100 years would do. What if this civilization advanced? They're 100 years ahead of us. And they develop some type of technological means to be able to harness energy, to be able to put themselves in a type of bubble and to counteract the forces of gravity and to traverse through some type of wormhole, to traverse a black hole without being condensed into some singularity and then expelled through a white hole on the other side. Perhaps they've been able to direct enough energy to rip a hole in space-time and to travel through it. We're basing our technological advancements and arguments on a theory of a scientist. A theory of a scientist. I'm not sitting here and telling you that I can sit down and write out the complex mathematical and scientific formulas for the theory of relativity, but I can also tell you this: how many theories that we see as facts have been proven wrong even by the mainstream in the last couple hundred years. You'd need more than two hands to be able to count them. But because we can't see it, because we can't conceive of it yet, I guess it just doesn't exist. The arrogance of ignorance. Just because humans can't or have not done something does not mean it can't be done, ladies and gentlemen. The third part of that argument is kind of like the second part of the argument, and we're told they'd have to travel distances that are far too vast. They'd die before they got here, even if they had the technology. Even with going light speed, it would take you, in some cases, hundreds, perhaps thousands of years to reach your destination. Well, that's also assuming a couple of things. That's, again, arrogance of ignorance. Assuming, one, that these beings haven't advanced to a point where they've made this a life's dedication to put themselves into some type of hypersleep and go. As a pioneer, a type of suicide mission almost, but to just traverse galaxies and solar systems and to maybe look for other life, maybe look for some type of, materials, minerals, whatever the case may be, metals. We've so rooted to emotions and familial connections that we couldn't imagine that. Few people on Earth would want to do that. I mean, how many people? But then there's a lot that did sign up to go to Mars, like 3,000. Think about that. 3,000-something people sign up to go to Mars and as a form of suicide, never to come back to Earth ever again. You don't think some extraterrestrial species, especially one void of emotional connections to one another, perhaps they reproduce in a scientific method in a laboratory, in vitro fertilization, perhaps they don't have sex, perhaps they're like some type of amoeba that splits off, who knows? But they died before they got here. How do you know that? They say, well, you can't prove that that this type of technology exists. You can't prove that aliens are here. Well, yeah. Maybe I can't prove it with some type of scientific analysis that's printed from some supercomputer, or prove it through a telescope, or prove it, which in some ways I think you actually can, and we'll talk about all of that. If you have the PDF file that I asked you to go to the website and check out, you'd see that there's a little bit more proof than you think there might be. Who says that these beings would die from traveling this far? Perhaps, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the biggest perhaps in all bold letters, the arrogance of ignorance assumes that human-like beings don't exist in our own solar system. Let's wrap our heads around that for a second. Just because you can't see the air that you breathe doesn't mean that it isn't there. We see such a small fraction of white visible light. We hear such a small fraction of what's available through auditory means. Humans on Earth, how many of us nowadays have looked through a telescope? How many people have been into space? Just a handful, really, when compared to the 7 billion people that exist on this planet. Russians, Chinese, Americans. A lot of them wouldn't see the truth if it was in front of them because they just kind of been conditioned to believe that doesn't exist, or it's been wrapped up under a matter of national security. You know, that I think it was the Space Act of 1958 that was signed in July, basically says that NASA is to make available all information that they obtain to the public, unless it's a matter of national security. So if you asked an astronaut what they saw, and maybe they saw some type of unidentified flying object, and NASA said, no, it's just debris, they'd have to say, okay, it's just debris. It's a matter of national security. Just as a side note, as a thought. But assuming that these beings would die from traveling so far is an assumption that they don't already exist in our own solar system. And that's something that's really important to understand tonight. That's something that's really important to make a realization of, because they've got us looking out there when we really should be looking in here. And that seems to be a pretty common type of distraction. It's a pretty common sleight of hand. Hey, look, God is out there. Come to the church. But God's actually inside of you. You are God. Hey, look, aliens might exist, but if they do, they're way out there, too far away for you to comprehend. Technology doesn't exist, and even if it did, they'd die before they got here. That's assuming that the speed of light is the speed of, the max speed of any technology that could be developed. That's assuming that these beings live. I mean, it's so, really, how arrogant do you have to be to believe that humans who live for anywhere from 60 to 70 years max, unless you're like a royal and you drink blood, then you might hit 102. That is basically nothing, perceptually, time-wise. These beings might live 1,000 years, and 200 years on a spacecraft traveling 6 times the speed of light may be a nap. We don't know. I can't prove that, but you can't disprove it. And if you try to disprove it, the arrogance of ignorance truly shines through, and you see how ignorant these people truly are, these scientists, these doctors, these professors, these experts, these professionals, these media pundits that just basically repeat what they're told to say. They don't know. There are over 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone, ladies and gentlemen. There's hundreds of billions of planets in our not our solar system, that would be really crowded, and our galaxy alone. There are trillions of planets in the visual universe. Hundreds and hundreds of solar systems just like ours. In fact, hundreds, thousands, no, millions, billions of solar systems just like ours. There's something else out there. People tell you that you're paranoid, or that you're living on the fringe, or that you're just thinking a little bit too much to conceive of the idea that there might be extraterrestrials out there somewhere else in the cosmos. I think it's much more paranoid, out of some type of fear, to think that we are the only species that exists. Nothing could exist except us. That sounds like the same mentality that brought about this conceptual idea of the Jewish God Yahweh, that I am all, I am God, I am everything. not really the type of divine, loving being that you might want to, I don't know, hang out with for eternity. Sounds like a human ego, doesn't it? Thinking that we are the only thing that exists in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe. Nothing else could exist because I am God, I am human. You are primitive in your thinking. You are arrogant, and out of that arrogance shines brighter than 1,000 suns the ignorance that is your decaying soul. Hundreds of billions of planets in the Milky Way, hundreds of billions of stars, trillions of planets and trillions of stars in the universe. And this is only what we can see. And you, professor, you, doctor, you, teacher, you experts, you professionals, you scientists, and you NASA experts, then turn to me and say, life doesn't exist anywhere except on Earth. And if you believe anything else, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. I think you, doctor, you, professor, you professional NASA experts, you scientists, you people are out of your freaking minds to tell me that there are hundreds of billions of planets and stars and trillions of planets and stars in the universe and trillions of infinitesimal possibilities. And we are the only thing that exists. Is the height of human arrogance. It is the arrogance of ignorance, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, I'm not angry at all. I'm passionate about this. If you're just joining us, my name is Ryan Gable. The website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That's www.thesecretteachings.info. And the reasons that you want to go to the website, I will tell you this, you can download all of our past episodes for free. Spread the word about the Secret Teachings. We are growing, and it is because, and I'm not sugarcoating it or kissing ass, it is because you, the listeners out there, have spread the word and have sent shows around and told other people about the Secret Teachings. We are growing in terms of listenership. Also on the website, and I haven't even talked about anything in the PDF so far, there is a 30-plus page PDF on the website that you can download for free. It should be on the home page, and I think I actually have a PDF tab that you could, I'll put it up there too under the PDF tab. Go and download this PDF. It'll be entitled Never a Straight Answer. And it's got images of Earth's moons. It's got images of the sun, the moons of Saturn, the rings of Saturn, official NASA, Russian, European Space Agency photos with numbers and with websites that you can go check it out for yourself. I spent 10 hours putting this together, ladies and gentlemen, finding the most accurate, the most detailed, the most factual information that I possibly could. And, of course, I found an assortment of altered photographs and numbers that were changed and moved, but I found them. I found them. They can only move them so far. I found those little things. I found those photos. I found those little tricks that they use, and I bring them to you. If you'd like to support the Secret Teachings, you can do so on the website by going to the donate button for PayPal. We don't make money. I work multiple days a week. I have been able to recently, because of donations and because of book sales, do a second show, which is why we now have a Saturday and a Sunday new show of the Secret Teachings. And if you continue to help support the show, we'll continue to do more episodes. Eventually, we'll be doing a Monday show and a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'll do 7 days a week. People tell me you don't have enough material to do 2 days a week. What are you talking about? I will do 7 days a week, 4 hours a night, and still not get to the point that we're trying to reach. Really. And it's not arrogance. That's just a fact. I've done 5 nights a week. I've done 6 nights a week sometimes. There's so much to talk about. We could talk about an assortment of topics. I mean, this topic here that we're talking about tonight, several topics actually, I still have not gotten to the file for which the entire show is based on yet. We're already at the end of the first hour. Any donations, by the way, any donations to the Secret Teachings over $15, you can have a choice. I'll get the email confirmation. I'll email you back and ask you. You have the choice of a PDF file that I will send you of my book, either The Grand Illusion, Slaves to Perception, or False Prophets and the Lovers of Children. Either of those books, I will send the PDF to you for any donations over $15. Now, any donations over $30, and I will send you both of the PDF files. The first book, The Grand Illusion, is over 730 pages, and False Prophets and the Lovers of Children is clocking in, I think, 263 pages. It's the newer book. In The Grand Illusion, and this is the last thing before we take a break, we'll come back with Mike D., I wrote an entire chapter about UFOs. It's in the section entitled Unexplainable Explained Phenomena. It's the reason that I named it that. There's a section called Arecibo and Chilbolton crops. Now, I call crop circles crop formations because not all of them are circles. And I detail that extensively in The Grand Illusion in this chapter 5. It's a big, I think it's like 80 pages. It's a big chapter. It could be a book in and of itself. In 1974, the Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico sent a message into space, kind of like the Voyager probes that were sent out, with a list of human DNA and size features and music, basically that clip that I played from the X-Files at the beginning of the show. And another message was sent from this radio telescope. It sent a message describing DNA, human forms, our system of numbers, world population, an image of the dish that it was sent from, and the location of Earth in our solar system. Now, maybe that's not the best idea to send out into the solar system. It's kind of like, I don't know, being in a really bad city and walking down the street and saying, hey, I found $1,000. I got $1,000 here, $1,000 in cash. It's probably not the safest thing. I'm right here by the diner, right here on 38th and 6th, and I've got $1,000 cash in my pocket, no way to defend myself, basically is what some people argue that to be. I mean, I'm kind of on board with that. But then again, you have to be brave if you want to be an explorer. Now, after sending this message, it's called the Arecibo message, in November of 1976, a return response, perhaps, was received in 2001, August of 2001, near the Chilbolton Radio Telescope in England. Now, if you have my book, The Grand Illusion, Slaves to Perception, open that book to chapter 5, flip about 20 or 30 pages into that chapter, and you will find the images, the digitized image of the Arecibo Radio Telescope transmission, and you will find then the crop formation that was found in August of 2001 near the Chilbolton Radio Telescope in England. Now, this is really fascinating because, one, it was highly, highly secure facility in England. Two, the response, as we might call it, is very similar to the initial message. Now, if you see the picture, it's pretty damn incredible. And let me just kind of explain it. The first message is basically human DNA, an image of what a human looks like, and this is all in a digital form. A telescope array of what the telescope the telescope looked like, yes, and also, world population, where the Earth is, all in a digital format. It's a very long rectangle standing upright like a pillar. The crop formation that appeared in this field was basically the exact same thing. The difference is it had a different DNA structure, and the beans had much larger heads. They did kind of look like the grays. Doesn't mean they're all gray. A lot of them might be pink, might be yellow, might be brown. Who knows? These might be gray biosuits. I don't know. Check out this picture if you haven't. You can go onto the internet and I'm sure find it if you don't have The Grand Illusion, or, email me, rdgable@yahoo.com. Don't be afraid to email me, rdgable@yahoo.com, rdgable@yahoo.com. So what I did in The Grand Illusion was I did a little calculation just to give us an idea of how big space is. And I calculated the time that it would have taken to send that original message to the time that we got that official or unofficial, quote-unquote, response 25 years later, 2001. In a vacuum, radio signals travel at the speed of light, which means that over 25 years, this message would have traveled roughly 5,865,696,000,000 miles per year. It's a distance, not a time. Now, assuming that another species received that message in, let's say, 12 and a half years, exactly the dead center, and immediately sent it back, then accounting for the time the original message took to reach that destination, then that means that the responding civilization would have to be roughly 73,321,200,000,000 miles away. That's pretty far. Now, there's about 33 known stars within 12 light years of Earth. Included in this distance are Proxima Centauri, Alpha Centauri A and B, and Sirius the dog star. The Centauri cluster, A and B, is about 4 light years away. Alien abductees have claimed that people that, or at least beings that they've been abducted by, came from here. Others have claimed Orion is popular, and also the constellation Reticulum, that includes the binary star system of Zeta Reticuli, which is about 41 light years from Earth. This is supposedly that group of Greys that abducted Barney and Betty Hill in 1961. Now, in determining the distance of the Arcebio message that traveled, let's say, 12 years at light speed, we cannot rule out the possibility of things such as some type of quantum gravitational entanglement probe that receives a message and automatically sends it back. Perhaps beings receive this message, within a couple of years of us sending it out, and they just waited around because they were lazy and then sent a response. But regardless of that, if this was a response at Chilbolton, we're talking the civilization, the conservative estimate that would have sent this would have been over 70 trillion miles away. That's pretty damn far. Even at light speed, that's going to take you more than a decade to get there. Again, or maybe these beings live much longer, they can travel much further. Perhaps they've broken that barrier, that speed of light barrier. Perhaps Bob, the turtle, is correct. Perhaps the speed of light, that wall, is not the edge of anything. Perhaps it's just simply a barrier that can be overcome. We can go over it. Maybe we can go through it. Maybe we can go under it. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that just because we don't have the technology to do it doesn't mean another species, another intelligence doesn't. Just because we are arrogant to think that we are so special nothing else could exist doesn't mean that all beings just simply disappear because we are arrogant out of our ignorance. Just because we think that beings would die doesn't mean that they would. Doesn't mean that beings don't exist right here, ladies and gentlemen, in our own solar system. Perhaps I'm crazy, but I can guarantee you the last 58 minutes that I've spent with you this evening is the most informative hour you probably have ever had on the concept of extraterrestrials. Because I'm not tied down by a particular belief. I'm not held down by some type of dogmatic, rigid perception of reality. I'm giving you an unbiased, unfiltered view on what the hell is really going on. Again, my name is Ryan Gable. This is The Secret Teachings. Our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. Go to the website. I ask all of the listeners out there, please help donate to the show. I will do more secret teachings the more donations we get. You can go to the shop tab, purchase one of my books, either The Grand Illusion, Slaves to Perception, or False Prophets and the Lovers of Children. In The Grand Illusion, we talk extensively in Chapter 5 about the topics we are discussing tonight, but there's a lot more coming up that we did not have in The Grand Illusion that you do not want to miss. And if you have not done so yet, ladies and gentlemen, and if you go to the website, thesecretteachings.info, download the free PDF file, the 10-hour compilation that I put together of all these photographs. Start looking through them, and maybe you'll see something I didn't see. If you do, email me at rdgable@yahoo.com. That's rdgable@yahoo.com. rdgable@yahoo.com. We will be back in just a few minutes with co-host Mike D. Remember that this is a special 2-part Secret Teachings. We are talking about Never a Straight Answer. We are talking about moons, the Mars photographs from Russia. We'll get into that later. The rings of Saturn, the sun, and extraterrestrials and aliens. We are talking about ideas that are outside of the mainstream, outside of the alternative. Ideas that are unique. Ideas that are closer to the truth because they are not rooted in any type of perceptual prison. You are listening to The Secret Teachings, and we will be right back.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?
What can be more alien than this?
Was that Ronald Reagan, Nick?
That was a very old Ronald Reagan. To back engineer captured extraterrestrial technology for adaptation into the United States space program.
Are you tired of shows about bogus photographs of guinea pigs on Mars or fake photos of Bigfoot in the woods? How about fake paranormal shows that don't actually discuss the paranormal or believe that every object they see in the sky must be extraterrestrial? How about big networks that use alternative news to promote their mainstream agenda, political shows that are one-sided, or shows that claim to know exactly what is happening for ratings, even though an event just broke in the news? Me too. At The Secret Teachings, we are not like any of those other shows. We cover any topic from symbolism to ancient history and from health to the occult, including the paranormal, but we don't just jump on board with every photograph of an orb or sample of Bigfoot hair. We have no political affiliations, no religious backing, and no financial backing. We want proof and not someone's word. If you want proof, or at least a different perspective from a host that can both accept or deny all points of view and all pieces of evidence, without holding onto a preconditioned belief or looking for evidence to support a prior conclusion, someone who can even admit when they're wrong, then check out the Secret Teachings radio show. Airtimes and free downloads are available by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. That's thesecretteachings.info. I'm your host, Ryan Gable, and I hope that you will join us. Namaste.
Minds immeasurably superior to ours regard this earth People who question the official version of events are usually labeled with the term conspiracy theorist, since this term is associated with paranoia and insanity. The person's questions are immediately dismissed as the rantings of someone who has gone mad, and using the ad hominem argument by immediately attacking the person rather than addressing their question, no matter how seemingly insane it may at first sound, a preconceived, often repeated storyline is allowed to exist and masquerade as absolute truth. If you train the masses to laugh at what they don't understand and to dismiss it as nonsense, then you have essentially eliminated free thought and critical thinking with little to no physical force. By setting the standards for what is possible or not, by what is apparently right or wrong, you are able to engineer an entire group of people and thus influence their choices and lifestyles to fit the corporate, political, socio-economic agenda of the real men behind the curtain. This has been an alternative fact brought to you by The Secret Teachings.
Howdy, this is Jim Mars, the New York Times bestselling author of Crossfire, Rule by Secrecy, Rise of the Fourth Reich, and my latest one, Our Occulted History. And you're listening to The Secret Teachings.
I have lived with a fragile faith built on the ether of vague memories from an experience that I could neither prove nor explain. When I was 12, my sister was taken from me, taken from our home by a force that I came to believe was extraterrestrial. This belief sustained me, fueling a quest for truths that were as elusive as the memory itself.
Welcome back to The Secret Teachings. I am your host, Ryan Gable. The website, www.thesecretteachings.info. And if you head on over to the website, you can still grab a free PDF copy of the notes for tonight's show and tomorrow night's show. We are talking about official and unofficial photographs from Mars, the moons of Mars, Earth's hollow moon, something else we'll talk about later, the rings of Saturn, and the sun. We're also talking about the concepts of extraterrestrials and aliens, as I discussed in the first hour of today's show. On the line with me, I also have my co-host, Mike D. Mike D., how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. I'm ready to blast off.
Ready to blast off. I love the double entendre there. I'm ready to blast off, too, so 3, 2, 1, here we go. In the first hour of today's show, Mike, I went through what I called the arrogance of ignorance. The ignorance of human beings who argue about the existence of extraterrestrials or alien life, and they ask questions like these. I'll ask you this question as if I'm playing devil's advocate in this situation. And the question that typically gets proposed is that the technology just simply doesn't exist for beings from another galaxy, another solar system. It just doesn't exist for them to be able to travel that far to get to where we are. How do you respond to something like that?
That's pretty silly, since the universe and galaxies are much older than the Earth. So to say that there isn't a civilization out there that is more advanced than us and has this technology is just it's silly. It's pretty silly argument.
That's basically what my response is, and another part of that argument for the opposition, I don't like making this about opposition and two people battling each other, but that's what it seems to be. I like to stand outside of that argument, but these seem to be the arguments against extraterrestrials, that if they would travel thousands or millions of light years to reach us, first of all, how are they doing it? The technology just seems to be outside of our even imagination. But that doesn't mean the technology cannot or does not exist. I mean, what I talked about in the first hour, Mike, imagine a civilization just like ours, people just like us, identical. But in 100 years from now, let's say our civilization has reached some type of interstellar capabilities. Let's say that this civilization that's just like ours, however many light years away, is exactly 100 years in the future, technologically advanced more so than we are. They've reached that capability. Just because we haven't reached it yet, at least publicly, does not mean the technology does not exist. Am I correct?
Yes, and I would also add that the argument that how can they travel so many miles, so many light years away from us? The technology, the system, the theory is there that we already discussed here on Earth presently is wormholes, and you have scientists that agree that it is theoretically possible for wormholes to exist in the bend space and time, so you can easily get from point A to point B. So, I mean, again, the arguments are flawed. It just doesn't. You basically just put on your common sense cap, right, and think about it.
We should start selling common sense caps, I think, is what we should do. Little baseball cap.
Pills. Pills that people take they'll buy them a lot faster.
They take pills for everything nowadays. I'm sure that someone would buy a common sense pill.
We should make them and fill them with sugar.
Oh, absolutely, just a placebo.
Common sense pill. Yes, exactly.
The assumption, Mike, that human beings don't exist, aliens don't exist in our own solar system is something that it's always been my argument against those who say, well, they'd have to travel so far to get here. Well, that's based upon the arrogance of ignorance, making an assumption that human-like beings don't exist right here in our own solar system right now.
Exactly.
There are hundreds of billions of planets in the Milky Way, hundreds of billions of stars, trillions of planets, trillions of stars in the visual universe that we can perceive through our senses and with our technology, and it gets bigger and bigger every single day. The teachers, the experts, the professionals, the professors, the scientists, the doctors that tell us otherwise have been conditioned to a particular point of view in order to hold human emotions and human perception in a prison cell. Now, in 1960, I think it was the 1960s, there's an institute called Brookings, and they released a study that they eventually passed along to NASA, Mike, that they claim would be the result of contact with an alien race. And they say, these are a couple of quotations from the report, they say that this would cause, quote, sweeping changes or even the downfall of civilization, end quote, and, quote, societies have disintegrated when confronted by a superior society, end quote, as if we reached a point in space where we came into contact with an extraterrestrial species, if it was even 100 years more advanced than us, that this could possibly cause the disintegration of our culture and society. What do you think about that?
The Brookings Institute, created and founded by who? You got to look a little deeper than that. That's kind of theory of mass chaos in the streets. If the truth was known to people, it's just a cover-up. It's just a way to prevent the truth from coming out by having
it's
these
fear,
reports
I think.
that people would flip. That people would flip out. Maybe 60 years ago, but not now. Definitely not now. People would be excited about it, and you wouldn't see. You see more, violence and chaos in the street with, a cop killing someone than you would see with the news that we're not alone in the universe. I mean, that's just the report is ridiculous.
I think that that's true to a certain extent. I'm about 95% with you. There is a small percentage that I can see how certain, especially religious groups, certain cults would absolutely go crazy if this was to be revealed. However,
not the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, they would. They said that the aliens come down. They would
baptize the gray. Yes, exactly. But that's actually the point I was going to make, is that we've seen a slow integration of these ideas being pushed. Not popular culture, but we're talking about mainline institutions beginning to push these concepts on the people. And, of course, movies and television, video games and books and magazines, people have been kind of desensitized to the idea. But you're right. I mean, the Vatican, a major power in the world as an institution, more powerful than some countries, has made the announcement that they are now going to baptize the aliens when they come down. The thing is about this, I think they're just trying to cover their butts. What do you think? Or the Pope saying that, hey, if aliens exist, God could have created them too.
It's more like the Greys would say, if the Pope tried to baptize them, and say, well, we actually created your religion. You didn't know that.
That's right, and they're going to keep all.
Oh
those,
yeah, we did. We did know that. We didn't want the people to know that. So let me bend over here. Let me just put some water on your forehead.
I was about to say that I think they keep the alien kids in the spaceship. You don't want them going near the Vatican. You never know what might happen in there. But you have so many different situations and so many different ideas that are promoted by what we might call the alternative or the fringe sect of society, who always seem to push this idea that yes, and this is a little bit of a recap from the first hour, but yes, if you see a UFO, then by assumptive definition, it must be alien. You get the other side of the argument, the mainstream professors with their long beards and PhDs that say that could be nothing more than an airplane or the reflection of light off of some building window. And I think both sides, most of the time, are completely incorrect. These are structured, pre-planned, placed arguments that people have, and they don't get to the bottom of what's actually happening. We don't have the capacity, it seems, to be able to have this discussion without reverting to some preconceived notion or idea, Mike.
I would agree with that, sure.
I mean, what do you think? When it comes to having this type of discussion, when it comes to coming to the realization that we are not alone in the galaxy, the universe, even the solar system, is this something that at any point in the past that maybe made you a little bit uneasy to think about?
Not at all.
Not even the idea that maybe this...
Not at all, because if the only way that we're being controlled, if we're being controlled at all, is on the down low. There will never be, some type of ET that comes forcefully wants to take the planet and enslave the Earth. To me, that's not. I don't see that scenario. Now, if the ETs wanted to have some type of control over us, and they would do it under the pretense of, the bars are up, but we don't see the bars, And who knows? Maybe they're doing some of that on the moon, where they're beaming stuff at us. Who's to say? But I don't think a full-force alien invasion would ever take place.
No, I think if we ever saw something like that, it would be very, very artificial, very manufactured from start to finish. Personally.
Of a false flag operation for whatever reason.
Which could be a lot of the reason why we see so much of this pushed in popular culture and acknowledged by mainstream institutions such as the Vatican, as this is perhaps one of the coming great deceptions in the future, a fake alien invasion. Maybe I'm out there too far in the fringe, but these concepts nevertheless are concepts that I think they need to be discussed, because when we examine, for example, the arguments, we've already talked today about UFOs, but let's examine the moon and the Apollo moon visits, Mike. There's this argument that you either did or didn't go to the moon. You hear people say, well, do you believe we went to the moon, or are you one of those conspiracy theorists who think we didn't go to the moon? Now, that kind of a question, that kind of assumption, that kind of presumptive mentality does not leave much room for an alternative thought process, such as this. If someone was to ask me that question, I would say, well, I don't necessarily think we didn't go to the moon, but I don't necessarily think that what you saw in terms of images and data was necessarily the truth. The problem is the argument always seems to be about whether we did or didn't do something, when in fact the truth, the kernel, lies in the center of that argument. I believe that we probably went to the moon. However, the videos and the photos were either completely faked or airbrushed over to a point of artificiality. So in that context, Mike, what do you think about the moon landings? We are going to get into those as well as official NASA photographs that you can see in that PDF. If you go to thesecretteachings.info, you can download it for free. So, Mike, what do you think? The moon landings, people argue, are they fake? Are they real? And they don't leave much room for the alternative types of discussions. What's your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. We did go, but I think some of the pictures definitely are fake. That they used maybe just to show higher quality images from what they did in the sound studios than what we actually had up there. And then maybe to show the Russians that maybe we were behind. We wanted to be the first ones there, so we put these fake images out there, and then we actually went a little while later. So that could be very much plausible. But I do think that we definitely have been there, and I definitely think that when they said that we stopped going, that wasn't true either, that we actually kept going.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, NASA had 3 additional Apollo missions, Apollo 18, 19, and 20, reportedly. Apollo 18 and 19 were both completely funded, and all of the equipment was purchased prior to, seemingly as if it was a random occurrence, NASA shut down those 2 Apollo missions. And
well, they said what? They said that, we didn't have the funding. One of the things, we didn't have the funding for it.
But Apollo 18 and 19 were already funded, which is the funny thing about that argument. Officially, they were already funded, and then they come out and say, well, we didn't have the funds to fund a program that's already funded.
Yeah.
It's like they didn't have the colored ink. They didn't have the money to pay for the colored ink for the photographs. They don't have the space to load all the photographs onto their servers. These ridiculous arguments. The arguments such as this, NASA said back in, I think it was 2008 and or 9, because there was a couple of different stories that came out about this, that the moon landing tapes disappeared. They could not find them. I got another story, I remember. This one is, I just pulled this up. This one in particular comes from Reuters.com, is that the moon tapes accidentally got erased.
Was that Apollo 11 mission you're talking about, where the audio and everything else was lost?
Well, that was one of them, absolutely. NASA claimed in 2006 originally that the video recordings from the 1969 landing just simply vanished. They could not find them. It was like somebody picked them up and walked out the door with them.
Yeah, that's so ridiculous. So think about it. If you're like a very, very you're a very popular, well-known architect firm, and one of the first buildings you ever designed that has won all these awards and has all these accolades, the drawings for the building and the computer files that you did the building on and everything else goes missing in your HQ headquarters. Now, that to me, that in itself sounds ridiculous because everything's backed up, triple backed up. The owner of the firm has that information. It's just, I can't believe people buy that story. Oh, it just disappeared.
I know.
I don't remember what happened.
2006, NASA says that they lost the original moon tapes. Later on, this was reported by the mainstream, Mike, a McDonald's was purchased. It was abandoned, basically, at the time. And the people that purchased the McDonald's found all of these tapes and these machines. And it turned out that these were the NASA videos. Did you know that?
I did not know that, no.
Yes, the NASA videos. This is official. Ladies and gentlemen, you can look this up for yourself. I will find a link and put it onto the website. NASA could not find the files in 2006, and they turned up at an abandoned McDonald's. That is one of the strangest. That story is almost stranger than the connections of Iran-Contra. It doesn't really make that much sense. And in 2009, after NASA had found these tapes at a McDonald's, they claim that they still can't show you the tapes because they accidentally got demagnetized and erased. wouldn't you think they would take better care of this? NASA is very well known. It's like a military-run institution. They are very well known for meticulous record keeping and just downright hardcore training until you get it right, and then you still train and train and train and train. They don't make mistakes. If something happens, it's an anomaly most of the time. That's kind of the persona they have. That's kind of the operation that NASA runs. Yet...
Well, yeah. Here's another thing on NASA. I mean, if it's first of all, it's not a scientific organization. It's run by the Department of Defense. It's a military operation.
That's right.
People seem to think that all scientists, everything that we launch into space, every satellite or every person is doing some type of scientific experiment, which is ridiculous. But second off, if it was really just for science, why would they have two separate radio transmissions, a public and a private? If it's science, science says everything, knowledge should be shared out there for everyone. But these covert activities that they do, they have two different radios, a public and a private channel. They switch it off when they don't want the people on their ham radios to listen in.
That happened multiple times on the Apollo 11 mission. As a matter of fact, that happened when they landed on the moon, and as they were orbiting the moon. This happened twice. Armstrong switched to the medical channel, and ham operators later picked up the transmission that there are other beings, if you will, on the moon. There are ships along the crater of the moon. Now, you couple that with the fact that, according to the Space Act of July 29th, 1958, which essentially established NASA officially, it basically says that all the information collected by NASA, which would include that observation by Neil Armstrong, any of the photographs taken by any of the lunar observatory missions or any of the Apollo missions, is to be made available to the public. As you said, Mike, it's public knowledge, it's science. Unless, and this is what the Space Act of 1958 says, unless it was a matter of national security, then NASA gets kind of snowballed back into the idea of the Brookings Institute in the 1960s, that this could cause society to disintegrate. I disagree with that, but I just got to think for an association, whatever you want to call NASA, never a straight answer, that doesn't really make mistakes, to lose the videotapes, to lose the tapes, then to have them accidentally erased. This seems beyond irresponsible. It seems so irresponsible that it sounds like it was done on purpose. And even then, I don't believe that the tapes are gone. They've got these things digitized and backed up somewhere, but the reason they say they can't show them to us officially is because they've been erased. You'd think that an organization that takes so much time and planning would have a backup file. That's just my thought.
Yeah, exactly. I've got two NASA stories. One, the guy actually worked there for a little while, and I told him about that, and I said, hey, every director of NASA has a military background, has some sort of military. They're in the military, they're ranked officers or something to do in the military field. Oh, that's not true. We get on the website, we go back to a history of directors, you click on it, they give you a little info on the director, bam, military. And then another story, a guy that used to work at NASA too has his own store now. I go in sometimes and visit, and I said, so he was trying to get back in part-time because he got laid off. So I said, how is Never a Straight Answer doing? Are you communicating with Never a Straight Answer? And he just smiled. He knew exactly the acronym I was talking about. He just looked at me and smiled. I mean, people there working know that there's two different operations going. You know, it's compartmentalized, and some people know a lot more than others. Some people know nothing at all. Some people just know what their job entails, and that's it. It's crazy.
It is, and the questions that we are proposing tonight, ladies and gentlemen, are questions that can truly break the paradigm in understanding what really goes on above us, even what goes on here on Earth with the very groups, institutions, and people that deal with what goes on above us. It's really fascinating to me that certain statistics, a lot of them are just made up, but I find this to be a very strange statistical number here, Mike, and we're going to now get into